Not for the first time, the question of the morning is, how do you solve a problem like Prince Andrew? It just seems every time you think it's all settled down. We had the drama documentaries about the Newsnight interview earlier this year. That's settled. Everything's OK again. You scratch the surface and another scandal pops out.
This is pretty devastating, actually. On the one hand, although his links to this Chinese spy, this spy will be named. But whether the courts if the courts don't lift the name. In the first stage, the Immigration Appeal Panel said he should be named. The courts have overturned it. He will be named by an MP under parliamentary privilege, means they can say anything they like without being sued.
And we can report it.
And we can report it. That's the point. And parliamentary privilege should only be used rarely and occasionally when it's in the public interest. And I think there is a public interest here to know who this bloke is. There'll be other people may have discovered, oh, my God, I was doing business with him. I was consorting with him, who may not know.
So it's in the public interest that we know who he is.
Of course it is. If you're in the United States, you'll be reading this in your newspaper.
Oh, you can now. It's all over the American media.
Yeah.
Ironically.
Yeah, and China too. So we're entitled to know, and the court should just get on with it. But I think he'll be named.
Why haven't we named him? What's the restriction?
There is a court order.
There's a court order, and I think...
You can only call him H6.
Yeah, it's privacy and security. But that'll get reviewed.
Part of
It'll almost certainly be lifted. The ongoing case.
I think they were doing it as part of taking away his passport and banning him, weren't they?
Yep.
That they also said as part of that his identity should be protected. But it feels like the situation has moved on.
But
so what happened?
There's been a massive failure here. Look, of course, we're focusing on Prince Andrew, but this bloke got to see Theresa May when she was Prime Minister, David Cameron. He was really plugged into the establishment. Why did the intelligence services not know who he was and what he was doing?
Well, yeah, so actually, let's talk about that now. Where is the vulnerability in our system then? Is it MI5, MI6? Is it, security generally? Is it, the way we operate and how desperate we were for links with China?
Yes.
Business.
Well, don't you remember David Cameron talked about a glorious new era, took him for a pint in his local pub at Chequers.
Chinese president.
I mean,
not the spy, the Chinese president.
Yeah, the actual president.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of legitimate Chinese business people over here. They're not all spies. We do a lot of trade and we invest and we buy.
And trade and economics are important. We need
massively.
that.
Look, it's the second biggest economy in the world. And then the security service will, because they picked him up at the airport and got his phone and went through everything, they'd have been monitoring him. So they would have been watching his contacts, trying to see who else has got in his web. And of course, one of them was Andrew. And they get the phone and the spy's briefing says Prince Andrew is desperate and will grab at anything. And I think that tells you a lot about Andrew and why he's such an embarrassment for the royal family. He's an embarrassment for Britain. He's an embarrassment to himself.
He also says that this Chinese business is at the top of a very important tree.
Yeah.
Because Prince Andrew... We're never sure how Prince Andrew affords his lifestyle. He lives in a magnificent 30-room mansion in Windsor Great Park. I've been there. I've interviewed him there. When I got there, I thought I was going to a lodge, a small lodge. It was like a stately home. It was extraordinary. It was daunting in its size. And then we were going out. I was going out with him. You hear this whirring sound. What's that? A helicopter landing in the garden. Off we go in a helicopter. I mean,
what was he like, Andrew?
Well, actually, I spent a week with him in Singapore too. I was on the Telegraph then. I wouldn't say he was likeable. I wouldn't say I wouldn't say he was thick either, because a lot of you say he's thick. He was calculating, but what he was rather good at his job.
Was he
as trade
entitled?
ambassador.
Was he entitled?
He was. But money in Singapore flocked around him.
So in a way, that soft power that back then he would have been using for, he was effective at.
He was. And do you know who I bumped into while I was out there, as you do, hang on, in a hotel, Tony Blair, former Prime Minister. And I told him I'm doing this piece about Prince Andrew, the trade ambassador. He said, he's very good at it. That's what Blair said.
Let's just remember...
On the record.
Let's just remember this sleazy slime ball at the time...
Who, me?
Was involved, Prince Andrew was involved. Was involved then with Jeffrey Epstein. So he was also accused of using all his access.
I don't think we knew
his access to further his own sexual and financial.
But back then we didn't know that.
Needs, desires, whatever you want.
Well, the impression that I think we're reasonably entitled to form, now Andrew has so much form for making these terrible misjudgments, is that when there's a whiff of money in the air, his instinct to ask the right questions evaporates. He simply doesn't ask. Now, he was quite close to this guy, obviously. He came to his birthday parties, for example. It doesn't seem to have occurred to him to ask the simple question, why does this guy want to be so friendly to me?
Yeah.
Why does this extremely important man out of China want to be so nice to me, Prince Andrew? Oh, maybe there's an ulterior motive. Why does Epstein want to be so nice to me? Oh, maybe there's an ulterior motive.
Yeah.
He never seems to ask those questions.
No, because it's always him. And it's that expectation, it's that entitlement, it's that arrogance. And he's got used to a lifestyle of people fawning on him and living the high life.
Well, isn't it that partly their problem as well, then, that nobody's been direct? And also the system, because it seems like it's going to emerge, and there's various reports that other people have been hoodwinked by the spy. What does the king do? You know, he's had a terrible year with his own health, and also, of course, Catherine, Princess of Wales. That image of going to church on Christmas Day is such an important one now. It's developed into it. I'm sure he doesn't want Andrew to be part of it. Does he tell him not to come?
Well, I think he will hope that Andrew does the decent thing and decides to spare his family the embarrassment.
Of that in past form, that
No.
Andrew has that ability to assess?
No, because he's got the skin of a rhino. He has the skin of a rhino.
Well, we've seen him, the way that he forces himself to the front.
Yeah.
Elbows out, you know, he gets himself into pole position when there's even... There is at the front there.
Yeah.
When there's even the smallest possibility of him being allowed in. So I pick up Kate's question to you. Charles is going to have to tell him, isn't he?
I think he is.
I would have thought so. But look,
Does he have the right to tell his brother
yeah, he
not to go
does.
to a family gathering?
Yeah, I would have thought so. One, as the elder brother, and second, you're the monarch. Look, one of the problems with the hereditary monarch, is you get all these hangers-on. You don't just get you get a family, good and bad. You've got Harry doing his thing in the States, and now you've got Andrew just causing endless trouble. Endless trouble. But it is on Christmas Day. The story is: does the king walk with his tarnished brother to church, or does he not? And I think the better story in the optics and looking at the public is it's better if he doesn't. Because, of course, they would have wanted that walk into church to be all about the king in rude health, Kate recovering from cancer treatment. It's now, have you got this, at best, gullible, at worst, avaricious, desperate, grabby person.
Andrew makes the headlines, doesn't he? It doesn't matter what the royal family is doing. If Andrew's in the news as he is now, then he tops the headlines. What about this big lunch on Thursday? It's the big pre-Christmas royal family lunch. About 60 of them all going to be gathering together at the palace. Again, the papers are saying this morning that Andrew's going to be quietly told, don't show up.
I think he'll go to that one, actually. But the palace is pretty big. There's ways in and out of there where perhaps we won't be seen and we'll be told afterwards.
You mean they'll stick him in starvation corner?
That sort of thing. I think he's more likely to be at that than he is at... I mean, he could still go to Sandringham, he can still be with the family, but he doesn't have to do the walk into the church.
One more question before we move on. Where is he getting his money from?
Well,
he's living in this enormous pile in Windsor Great Park.
Yeah.
It's just extraordinary. We know that officially his only income is his pension from his military service. That's it. Where's he getting the kind of money to live the life that he lives?
The Queen was a wealthy woman and would have left him money in the will. We'll never see the Queen's will because you don't publish wills of monarchs. So I imagine she left him money, and the Queen's and his grandmother, Queen Mother, will have left him money too. We don't know how much. Again, those wills will never be published.
But the security bill alone is £3 million a year. That's £60,000 a week you have to find for that, for your gas and electric and your food and everything else.
And the King has switched that off.
I don't know. It's a mystery that requires unravelling.
Well, he's always denied, hasn't he, allegations of any sexual inappropriateness on any level.
When he paid the £12 million to settle a case and keep it
he has denied it. He has denied it.
When he paid the £12 million
that's not unrelated in the sense that it's about money and undue influence fears. Nick Candy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Reform Party treasurer is apparently planning to fly to the US to meet Elon Musk. Lots of reports that Elon Musk is going to donate £100 million to the Reform Party. Now, That's got to be not good news for any other parties to get that big chunk of cash, but also that feels like a very direct influence into our system from a man that has such influence.
So Elon Musk was a Tory donor, gave over £300,000, a property developer. He's probably a billionaire, and
I'm sure he's a billionaire.
Self-made man.
Yeah.
Self-made man. I spoke to him a few times last week, and I wrote about him in the Mail at the weekend.
You spoke to Elon Musk?
To Candy.
To Nick Candy.
No, not to Elon Musk. And there's no doubt he's in direct contact with Musk, and Musk can, because it's permissible, pay money into reform through the British arms of his companies, such as Twitter.
I think this is a huge...
But it won't be anything like 100 million if he gets it. My prediction would be several million.
It's a huge hole in the law. It's a 2000 Act on donations that allows foreign people with companies in the UK to donate to political parties and finance elections. It should be, and it should have been right at the beginning. I argued this at the time. It should have been you have to be a British citizen on the electoral register to give money. Because otherwise you've got Nigel Farage says, I'm the Great Patriot, and he's going to Elon Musk, who's got US, Canadian, South African citizenship. He hasn't got UK citizenship. Why don't you buy our democracy?
All right, so setting the principle of what you've said aside, in real terms, if this money is forthcoming, could it make a real difference to the next election in this country?
Without a doubt, because Reform, by their own admission, would say that they were not a professional party.
Because they didn't have the dosh.
They didn't have the dosh, they didn't have the know-how. This could transform everything. They need new offices, they need professional staff.
I mean, it seems to me that we're talking about two related stories, really, which is foreign influence on our lives here in the UK. Have we got a hole in our protection?
We have. Look, Nigel Farage campaigned to get out of the EU, claiming it ruled Britain. He's going to turn Britain into the 51st state of the USA if he does this.
Yeah.
Now, there are limits on how much you can spend in an election. The Conservatives raised it quite considerably. I think it's more than £30 million now. But you could spend money all the way up in the election.
That's right.
You could effectively buy it. We need to make sure foreign money isn't buying British democracy, and also there is a cap on individual donations. So incredibly rich global billionaires cannot buy election results.
Right. OK, let's move on to the weekend's quite a big political story. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary. So interesting, this. In the run-up to the last election and in the last year of opposition, Labour were not backwards in coming forwards at attacking Conservatives' policies on immigration. Obviously, they went for them on Rwanda. They basically said, you don't have any plans apart from Rwanda, which isn't working because the courts won't let you. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Well, now Labour are in power. And Yvette Cooper will not say, after repeated questioning, she will not say what the timetable for cutting the small boats crossings is, because she says, basically, it's a hostage to fortune. But isn't that politics? If you don't put a timetable on it, you can't begin to make any kind of assessment of whether they're doing the job or not.
She hasn't got a clue. They were going to smash the gangs, remember?
That was the slogan.
That was the slogan. Smash the gangs. They haven't smashed the gangs because it's incredibly complicated, because if it was so easy, the last government would have smashed the gangs, and they failed. They tried and they failed. The gangs, every time they get rid of one gang, another one pitches up. They're all around the world because this is a very lucrative trade worldwide.
But she knows she's got to get the numbers down. She's now signed an agreement with Germany where the boats are coming through Germany to try and stop the boats. She's signed...
You mean the hardware?
The hardware, the boats they get in. She signed a deal with Iraq to return people to Iraq who in the past couldn't be returned there. Because the one big success the last government had was with Albanians.
Right.
And they signed a deal with Albania that people came across on small boats. It was 10,000, 12,000 of them a year. You could be returned to Albania. You've got to stop the crossings. You've got to smash the gangs on however you do it, try and stop them sailing, not have their boats. And then when people come across who are judged not to have a right to stay here, you have to be able to return.
Well, that all sounds but it hasn't had any effect.
No, but
more boats are coming now than ever before. It's winter.
No, there'll be fewer people this year than 2 years ago when it hit 45,000. But she also said in that interview, not shown, that deportations are at a 5-year high.
Yeah, but they're lower than the number of people coming in.
Yes, but
across the channel.
She's inherited a system that was broken, absolutely broken. I was talking about smash the gangs. The system was smashed, and she's got to make it work. But if she says, right, I'm going to reduce it by 2,000 by next year, you might get accused of being too low, but secondly, you make a rod for your own back. I'd like to know what the figures are, because I'm sure internally in the Home Office...
They must have an assessment.
They will...
And look, they
will be doing it, but they don't want to fall into the trap.
But hang on, Kevin.
Rishi Sunak, who said, I'll stop the boards. You'll never stop all the boards. You just won't.
What has he got? Milestones or millstones, the Prime Minister, setting all sorts of targets, whether it's in the NHS and when they're going to get more dentists, when they get more nurses. Targets, but not on immigration.
Because it's very...
Not on... And
it's harder with people.
And
that's why...
Hang on. And in his 6 milestones, which are the important statements of policy, none of them mention immigration. Extraordinary. And it's the big issue, in my view, and it's going to go right to the top of the
biggest issue is the economy.
Well, it's linked.
Standards. Well, it is when people come here and work and pay tax.
Yeah.
It's the economy, and then sometimes it's migration, sometimes it's the state of public services.
OK, let's move on. Your local university is the place for you to go if you've just done your A-levels. That's according to Peter Lample. He's this incredibly wealthy guy. He's given away multiple millions of pounds, not just to charity, but to education clauses and all the rest of it. And he's basically said, look, it's costing us a fortune for purely an accommodation alone to send kids a long way away to university. We should do what they do in America, what they tend to do in France. People should go to their local university. What do you think of that? And stay at home, live with the parents.
I think it's happening more and more. In Scotland, there was always a tradition of that anyway. But I'm a visiting professor up at Sunderland, and I see a lot of first-generation students. It's got a big emphasis on vocational training, getting people
Professor Kevin.
to do...
Professor Maguire.
You can call
Who'd
me
have thought
sir. You can call me
I
sir.
would, Andrew.
Call me sir.
Who'd have thought it?
So it happens already. But if you move away, I can see a benefit in you moving away, your experience of going somewhere else in the country.
Part of your life experience, yeah.
Well, that's what I thought part of university was about.
Yes.
But you pay. You pay
That's
for that. So I
problem.
can see it's about reducing your bill. Yeah. But it just means that some kids from working-class homes are less likely to go away because they fear the debt. While if you have middle-class homes, particularly the bank of mum and dad, and they'll help you, then you're more likely to do it. So you get that division. You
do get that division, which the university is supposed to be trying to erase, isn't it? It's supposed to be giving people chances. But you're right, it is happening a lot. It struck me recently on a different report about education, how many of the youngsters that were talking about it saying, well, if this doesn't affect me, a rise in whatever it is, because I'm living at home with my mum and dad. Yeah. And that makes it very different. And it will be poorer households that don't go. Does that mean that some of the universities like Oxford and Cambridge you can only go to if you live near? Because, you know, those sort of universities are really keen to get people from all backgrounds, they say there, but it becomes quite tricky. They are, and they have improved, although they're still dominated by people on higher incomes and private schools in particular. And this could make it more. Because if you look at the deciles, tenths, the richest tenth have a much higher proportion of kids going to university than the bottom tenth, and it comes down all the income scales, and we need more kids from poorer households to go, because that's how they will seize opportunity, and that's how we will begin to level up.
Can we just think about mum and dad? Do they really want their child at university coming home drunk every night from university, coming home at 2 or 3 in the morning?
I'm so sorry to see you go.
They want to just get rid of them. Then they want to pack that, say bye-bye, your debt, off you go. That's what I would have thought. Well, they might do, because if they're the ones having to pay for the accommodation. I was flabbergasted at the cost. A long time ago that I went to uni, and Darcy has just gone this term. I was flabbergasted at the change of cost. It's unbelievable. It's the same with my kids, but they don't come home drunk every night because they can't afford it. Another reason to go to the University of Life and find your own way.
Very quickly,
it does mean she appreciates me and washing more, though, so I'm very happy that
everybody
she's gone.
appreciates you, Kate.
Very quickly, do you like Brussels sprouts? Are you a Brussels sprout fan?
I'm not a huge fan.
Well, I've got, in that case, mixed news for you, good news for you. Apparently, this year's Brussels sprouts in the UK are 25% bigger.
Oh,
they are becoming massive. I saw some in my local supermarket. They're still selling the little baby ones.
They're not quite that big, by the way.
The green groceries, they're huge.
Is this fertiliser?
Look, it's a farming success under Keir Starmer in Labour. Forget inheritance tax on farms.
This means they're going to have to be cooked forever.
Bigger sprouts.
I know. Well, I don't think you can always chop them up, can't you?
Could you? Yeah.
But you're going to be sitting... Maybe everyone will just gather around one sprout.
Yes, exactly.
You can cook them with a bit of garlic and a little bit of bacon.
How very man of the people, Kevin Maguire. Garlic and bacon with his sprouts.
Well, what's wrong with that?
Back to boiling them.
Are you still living in a hole in the road with a bit of tarpaulin over it?
That sort of thing.